Council Rice, is anything to report from closed session?
Nothing to report from closed session.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to move the agenda. I'm going to move one agenda item around. We're going to go right to 5.2, discussion and possible action regarding possibly working with Recology Del Norte and the Crescent City Harbor in the fishing for energy project as promoted by Covanta. Now, I wanted to pull this up first because we have some people who are on tight schedules and flights and all that other things. And Ted, do you want to lead this discussion first, and then we'll have some input from our harbor master, Mr. Helms.
Sure. This seems to be a pretty good program proposed by Covanta in association with National Fish and Wildlife Federation and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and Schnitzer Steel. And essentially what they're proposing to do is to put a dumpster at the harbor for especially to receive fishing gear that has been abandoned or is collected by fishermen who are out there, and they can put it in this dumpster and it will be pulled away when it gets full. And so they could do this up to 4 times a year. I very much appreciate that they approached us, acknowledging that there is a garbage collections franchise, and part of that franchise is the understanding that if somebody is putting out a container for trash and someone is paying to have it collected, that is Recology's business. And
from any of the fishermen putting their household garbage in there? How are you handling that?
That's a good question, and I think the harbor master can address that, because I think they'll be putting that behind their gates where they have their other dumpster.
Any other comments from board members, authority members? I do have one question. Is there anything illegal, or is there a language in the contract which prevents this, Council Rice? I know we have contracts with Recology, and I want to know if there is an exemption, or are we doing anything that violates the contract?
So Recology's contract is exclusive for the purposes of collecting garbage and solid waste. So to the extent that things that are being put into these dumpsters will constitute solid waste, yes, then technically that's in violation of the franchise, and that's why we are seeking Recology's approval, or sort of their waiver of the violation of this section, before letting Covanta know that we approve of this project, that we don't have any objections.
So it's basically we're looking for implied consent.
It would be express consent in the form of writing.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move this on to the public section. And Charlie, I'd like you to come up, if you would, please, and identify yourself and your position and your take on this issue.
Sure. I'm Charlie Helms, Harbor Master at the Crescent City Harbor District, and I have some information. Could I? Okay. So I put some of these together just so everybody would have an idea of what's there. But yeah, what we're looking to do, and I guess to answer your question first, if we are able to do this, we're going to have the dumpster behind our fenced maintenance area. We also have a recycled oil program that we do the same way. We have an above-ground storage tank, and when fishermen come to recycle their product, they have to bring it behind our gate to one of our staff members so that we can verify what they're doing. So all that would go in here would be the items that are the commercial fishermen don't want anymore. It's old gear. And for our part, this won't change anything that we do with Recology. We're not looking to lower the number of dumpsters we have. We're keeping exactly the same amount. As a matter of fact, for crab season, we add dumpsters down by Citizens Dock. We're also doing a cleanup project where we're getting a 30 cubic yard dumpster from Recology to clean up an area of the harbor. So this is strictly this recycling program with the Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Covanta and Schnitzer. We thought it was a good idea. It's no cost to the harbor, which we love, because like everything else, money's tight. So we thought it'd be a real opportunity to give the fishermen an opportunity to come and just drop it off at the harbor, rather than there's another program going on sponsored by University of California, Davis, that's actually out in the waterways recovering gear, and they've already picked up over 550 crab pots that have just been abandoned or left offshore. So we thought this would be a great way that it doesn't cost the fishermen anything, doesn't cost us anything, to really keep the waterways and harbor clean. And that's why we were interested in it, and how about that? Anything else? Questions? Anything else I can help with?
Any authority members have questions for Mr. Helms? I do have one.
Yes, sir.
Mine would have to do with possible abuse. Will it be accessible to people? Well, a lot of people wandering around the harbor, they see a dumpster and they go to Plan B or Plan A and they use it. Now, will there be any abuse opportunity there, or is it going to be properly secured?
Not with this one. This one is going to be behind the fence in our maintenance area, exactly like our oil recycling program. So the only time it's going to be available is during hours when our maintenance crew is at the harbor, which is Monday through Friday, 7 to 3. Otherwise, there'll be no access to it from the
Will
public.
there be a lock on there?
Oh, yeah. No, this is where all our equipment is. We keep this area very secure, and that dumpster is going to be behind that fence.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Helms.
Okay.
I appreciate that. And any other board comments?
One real quick question.
Yes, sir.
So, and when I'm reading this information, I'm not really understanding what happens when the dumpster's full. Who transports it somewhere?
That is being arranged through, my contact has been with the Fish and Wildlife Foundation out of Washington, D.C., and they're the ones that are arranging transport. I don't really know who they have hauling it off.
Well, it's arranged by Covanta.
Yeah, I spoke to Covanta about that issue, and their main goal is to recycle as much as possible, and so that's why they partnered with Schnitzer Steel, who has an outfit in Sacramento. And the fishing gear, the fishing line and stuff will go to their incinerators. They have one in Stanislaus, I understand. They also have one in Oregon, and they have not yet figured out which direction these dumpsters will be going. It sort of depends on who they can get to haul them and the distance and the types of materials.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Schnitzer will take out the metals, and the rest will go to get burned. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite Tommy Sparrow up here for his take. And again, this somewhat steps on your turf in terms of what is garbage and what is not. So there is a contract in force. So Tommy, what's your mindset?
This actually began several months ago with Lori Poole being contacted by these people, and she carried it forward. And we can't do what I can't haul stuff to Sacramento or Portland, and I completely support this program 100%. You will have no problems with Recology at all. I just hope it works, and it should. It's kind of, there's a lot of little loose ends to be tied up, but as far as Recology interfering with it, we will support it 100%. And the other thing while I'm up here, I would like to move 7.4 up forward because Lori Cowan is
Yeah, I have 5.2 and have 7.4 coming right up.
Okay,
Hold off.
all right.
Give me a few more minutes.
Yeah.
We're getting there. I wanted to accommodate everybody. Authority members, any questions on 5.2? And we're going to move to 7.4 right after that.
Thank you.
Yeah, the question is there an action item on this?
Well, the action item is
Is this more FYI?
is this, as I see this, Ted, the action item is to go ahead and allow this process to continue. I'm wondering aloud, and then I'll say it so Council Rice can hear this, do we need some accompanying supportive paperwork from Recology to our system to allow this process to continue? Would that be prudent?
Yes, I think it'd be a good idea to have a letter from Recology just basically stating that they support this project and,
Do we need a letter if the manager of Recology says we're good with it? At a public meeting, on the record?
And I don't
Always
have an
get it in
issue
writing.
giving, I don't have a problem giving a letter, but I'm jumping on an airplane tonight and will not be back until the end of the month. And if you need my signature, it will not happen until November. And I don't have a problem with that.
Email be acceptable? Do you have the ability to reply to an email?
Sure.
So if I-
Reply to an email.
Exactly.
Yes.
So if I send you an email saying this is my understanding about what happened at the meeting and that you're okay with this, and you replied, yes, that is my understanding as well, would that be acceptable?
it's better than nothing.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
thank
fine
you,
with me.
Mr. Sparrow.
Okay.
And at this point, I will entertain any other comments from the authority to Mr. Sparrow. We're going to move on to the next item after we finish our public input from anyone else who wants to discuss 5.2. So that having been said, authority members, do you wish to address any comments to Mr. Sparrow on behalf of the college? Seeing none. Any other additional public comments at this time? Please approach. Limit your comments, if you would, to limit it no longer than 3 minutes. I don't mean to appear to be rushing anybody. I'm sorry if I'm doing that. I'm trying to accommodate people's schedules as they have let me know that they need to be certain places. So please identify yourself, Bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Bill Lonsdale, and I live in Crescent City. I'm a little bit confused by what's going on here, and so I would pose respectfully a couple of questions. First, under whose authority is this being done? Second, is there a role for the Waste Management District in this that requires a decision by your board? Third, is this a money-making or a money-losing proposition? And fourth, if it's a money-making proposition, who gets the money? This kind of falls into what Mrs. Wilson has been talking about, is creating some new lines of business for the authority to hedge against future revenue losses. And so it seems to me that there may be a good bit more to discuss before the board takes any action. Thank you.
Any additional comments from the public at this time? I will close public comments, and I will bring back the discussion to the authority board at this time. Keeping in mind Mr. Lonsdale brought up some valid points. And then I will ask, is there, and I think we can do this by a consensus, is there, not by motion, is there a consensus to allow this process to continue with Covanta taking over this one dumpster and providing recycling services to the harbor? So do we have any comments from our authority members? And I'll entertain a consensus vote on that.
I just want to say, it appears to me that that what we have in our packet is a port nomination form. It looks like it's the harbor that has the relationship with Covanta, and our real relationship in this whole matter is whether or not Recology is being impacted relative to their contract to transport disposable goods.
Mr. Ward is nodding his head in approval.
Okay.
And Tommy, you're of the same mindset. Good. All right. So I'll go on a consensus. Do we have a consensus to allow this process to continue? And with the
Do we need more consensus here?
Yes.
I mean,
is there anyone who objects to this? Okay. Hearing none, it has happened. Okay. So
Okay.
Charlie, you're all set. And then let's bring up 7.4 at this time. That will take place, Mr. Helms?
I'm sorry, can I just get some clarification
Sure.
on what we just did? Does Recology and the harbor need the authority's permission, so to speak, because you're going to be taking stuff outside of the waste stream, and the authority board kind of directs which way the waste flow goes? So if there is permission that needs to be had, then it seems like we'd have that on the agenda as an action item for that. But that's, I guess, that's my more of a point of order as to, or point of information as to, you know, is there something you need from us, or is this outside of our scope? Or is this just like, we're going to do this project and we're just letting you know about it?
Under the franchise agreement, we have the exclusive rights to haul all the garbage. That's the agreement. This is an exception to the agreement, and it's something that I feel is very beneficial to the harbor. It could be very beneficial to every fisherman out there, and I don't feel like Recology should stand in the way. We will be more than happy to make an exception to the franchise agreement to allow this to happen.
So do you need any, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is our role in this. Do we need to grant permission, or are you just saying, hey, we're doing this, and
that's the board decision, I guess. As far as I'm concerned, I'm giving an exception.
I
Right.
think the board's role would be if Recology did have an objection, then it would be the
like a good
authority's job
project,
to
So this
stand
is
up
essentially a
and-
passive action.
Well, and then also we are losing income, as Mr. Lonsdale pointed out, in that we're also out of the loop. I know you are as well, but then with the 10% franchise fee on top, that money would have come to the board, and so that this board also needs to be aware that income will be lost with this program. And I think that's Mr. Lonsdale's point that he just brought up, because this will...
And I agree with you, Commissioner Wilson, the income will be lost, but there will be an opportunity to legally dispose of these items versus what has been happening in the past. And although Recology will lose some revenue, the authority will lose some revenue, we may have a better and beautified ocean and harbor at no cost to either one of us. I mean, we're losing the revenue right now today. It's not there.
Right.
It's, you know, we're not seeing it. You guys aren't seeing it. So there's not a loss of revenue, it's just not a gain of revenue. And it's a gain of beautification and a gain of support to the harbor and to the fishermen. And I support it 100%.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, probably most of the debris right now is going into the ocean as opposed to going into dumpsters. It would also be my take on it.
So I'm hearing there's a greater good to the community, and the Solid Waste Authority Board is on board with this program, and we endorse it. I guess that's the action item. And by consensus, do I have everyone's okay? Is there anyone who objects to endorsing this program between these two entities? With the... That's good. Nope, okay. So you guys are fine to go, and we're happy to be part of that process. All right, let's move on to 7.4, and discussion and possible action regarding a letter to the editor submitted by Don MacArthur as published in the Del Norte Triplicate, October 2nd, 2014. Ted?
Following the publication of this letter, I, that morning, put off an email to Lori Poole of Recology, basically saying that I felt that her significant efforts, as well as those of her counterparts at the school district, Deborah Kravitz being key among them, this has been a very successful public-private partnership. And honestly, I feel like the folks who, while Mr. Hendrick and I did meet with Don Olson and Rodney Jan in January and February of 2012, there's really no doubt in my mind that most of the work creating the recycling programs that are in place at the school district was the work of Lori Poole, Recology, and her counterparts at the school district. And it's a very successful public-private partnership, and I appreciate the supportive comments by Mr. MacArthur, but in general, I think the thrust of the praise for that program really should go to Recology and the school district personnel.
Authority members?
Well, I think I would be inclined to have staff submit a letter to the editor correcting the facts in the letter. Because the other thing is the school district basically isn't being charged for recycling now. That's why it's dropped their expenses. And they weren't being charged before 3 years ago. So I congratulate them on not being charged for it. It's a savings, but the contract itself is not savings. And that's the erroneous stuff in Mr. MacArthur's letter is, and I think it's important, as Ted pointed out, that there was a private partnership in this, and it's a private company actually did the savings. So otherwise it's put out there as fact, and it's not fact.
Yeah, I also had some issues with the exact facts. Again, I've submitted the letter that came from Rodney Jan. It's in our prior minutes that shows the estimated annual cost increase to the school over the 9-month period that trash is collected was, he had, it was 60% increase, which would have been $87,738. And I know that the school district was able to go in and drastically, reduce their services and streamline as well. They did set aside some of the recycling, but again, most of those things did happen. I went back to a Triplicate article that was written in March of 2012 that also pointed out that the school had come up with an agreement with Recology, and that they were able to, at that point in time, by working together in partnership, were able to lower their costs so that they would be approximately $1,000 less a month than than it currently was. It was, I think he has here that it was $13,000 a month is what Mr. Jan has written down, and he had said that it would be going up to $21,000 a month. And by the time all was said and done, according to the triplicate article, it said that they were hoping to have the bill reduced to $12,000. So that's the only difference that I know is that in that school year, when it started in September, they did have the higher fee, September, October, November, December, and then, so I know it gradually went down, but there was a pretty significant increase over those few months. I didn't see the actual bill. I didn't have time to go take a look at it. I don't know if Ms. Cowan has brought any of the bill, but I do have some problem with the figures that were put forward in the newspaper, because I know the bill wasn't reduced until about 5 or 6 months into it, and it was a pretty significant increase. So looking at the, making sure the figures are accurate, I think it's good. But again, it was according to the newspaper, it was a reduction of services. So I would agree with Commissioner Sullivan.
Commissioner Hawley, did you have a comment?
I don't, if we're dealing with a few $1,000s one way or another, I think the point of the letter was that Recology worked well with the school district, and those costs were reduced, so they were paying less than what they were paying before. And I was at the school district at that time. I heard the discussions. I was at the dais at the board meetings, and it wasn't just recycling. They discovered that some of the bins were in a position where the driver had to get out and actually move the bin, and there's an extra charge for that. Those kinds of things were corrected with Recology's help. And so I think that was beneficial for all concerned, and it was appreciated. And I think that's what this letter is pointing out.
Let me read one sentence from the letter. It's not clear to me that a private entity would have been so forthcoming about changes that would result in lower payments to them. And that's exactly what happened, is Recology actually worked with the school district to lower their payments. That's the part I have a problem with, is that we should be writing some type of retraction or a response letter basically stating the facts. It was a private company. Without the private company involved, the school district is paying a lot more money, period.
Commissioner Gastineau, any comments?
It is important to recognize that some of the school district outreach that Recology engaged in was proposed in their proposal to provide the franchise collection services. So it was the authority's competitive process that precipitated the proposal that Recology submitted that included specific outreach to the school that we were then able to leverage as part of this process. So the authority did have a role in that. Recology is the authority's contractor, and specific outreach to the school district was part of that contract, is part of that contract.
My comments are more or less narrowed in on the letter itself, not the letters or the justification for any kind of actions that Recology has taken or this authority has taken. My comments relate to the accuracy of Mr. MacArthur's letter, which I considered many parts to be inaccurate. So that having been said, I'll open it up to the public at this time for public input. The course of action here, so everybody's aware, is this board, this authority, will or will not send a letter to the editor, clarifying what the roles are and what the facts are according to well, they're not according to anyone, they are the facts, because this is the authority. So having said that, I will ask public comments are open at this time. If you wish to come up, please identify yourself and whether you're city or county. Thank you.
Elizabeth Henry from the county. My thought would be to make this a whole thing positive. I'm really appreciative of hearing what Recology did with the school district, and I think that this could encourage other businesses to contact Recology and Recology to contact businesses, and maybe start a whole thing going where there is more information and more incentive to recycle by commercial entities. But to start picking letters apart and doing opinion pieces, I mean, all of us make mistakes. You all do. We could come and request that you you know, change and correct yourselves, you know, in the things that you say incorrectly. I'm not sure that the whole community read that letter and just went, oh my gosh, you know. So I really encourage a positive approach to this and make it an article where it really brings back what happened positively with Recology and the school district. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. Any other comments? Mr. Sparrow?
I reckon I'm up here again. This actually began back in Jan Morehouse's days, and when the contract actually went out to bid, I went to the board, not the board, the supervisor, whatever Jan Morehouse was, and I said, look, based on what I'm seeing here, superintendent, I said, based on what I'm seeing here, your rates are going to go up dramatically. Let's start recycling now, no matter who gets the rate, the bid. And I can tell you, it's not all about the money. It's what has been accomplished through the efforts, not only from Recology, not only from the Solid Waste Authority, not only from the board, but there's been an education process that has taken place that's going to take this county into the future with these little kids. Lori right now is in the kindergartens. She's working with kids every day, not every day. And I'm not looking at this, and I remember the people saying, Tommy, you're going to lose this much money a month. And we did. But you know, that's what we're here to do. We're here to figure out how to make this thing work, how to make zero waste. I'm waste zero. It's my responsibility as a manager to figure out how to make it work. And this has been a success, not only because of Recology. She has really been a big part of this. Lori, come on. And she pushed this thing forward when it was just like all but dead at one time. She got involved. She made it happen. It's not all Recology. It's people have taken hold of this recycling program throughout the school district. The students. That's where the success is. It's not us. It's not her. We have students that they go home right now and they recycle at home, where before they did nothing. And that's where this county needs to go. And and another person, Jeremy he's our new operations supervisor for Recology, and he knows this is high on his plate to make sure this stuff works not only, and I think Ms. Henry even touched on a good point, that although it works for the school district, it could work for Ocean World. It could work for everybody, every commercial business out there, if you just rethink what you're doing, realign some of the things that you've been doing for the past 10 or 15 or 40, 80 years, and just even in the household, rethink, realign, and redo what you're doing. Everybody's rate could go down. It's just crazy. I mean, but it worked here, and it's going to work better.
I'm going to talk.
Okay, so we get this protocol right.
Okay,
Please
so
identify yourself.
I'm Lori Cowan. I am a school board member, District 2. And it was back with Jan Morehouse. Bills were crazy. We were going line by line through the budget, and I called Tommy the next day and said, we're spending $20,000 a month. What can we do? He says, I will tell you what we can do. I've been trying to get this done, and no one's listening. And Lori and I started going into every kindergarten class and doing assemblies. And we literally, Lori Poole and I, worked 2 to 3 lunches a day at all the schools and just taught these kids, like he's saying, just taught them how to recycle so they could take it into the community. And it worked. And we started at the bottom up. We're still working on the high school and the junior high. But in 3 years, the first months, we're saving over $6,000 a month. It's up to over $8,000 a month. I pulled in BHC. They gave me a $10,000 grant to start offering hours because there was no hours or money in the district. So it's a community thing. It's very much a community thing. We now have a position and hired somebody because I could no longer go work lunches every day. Lori still does work with the kindergarten classes to, bring the new kids in and refresh the minds. It's a great program. And Recology was a huge part of it. I couldn't have done it without Lori at all. I mean, it was completely her. And end of the years, we do awards and we've done all kinds of things to make it fun. But I gotta say, Don's letter sent off a firestorm that was not intentional at all. He wished he could be here, but he's in the middle of testing. And he had inaccurate information, and he realized that afterwards. He's talked to Lori, he's talked to Tommy. He apologizes. It was a letter. Again, I hate to say this, but I don't even read the triplicate because, like you were saying, you read an article that was incorrect way back when about this program. I read it and laughed. There was people in there taking credit for something I'd never even seen that person in the lunchroom. And I thought, really? Where were you? You can't take what you read in the triplicate, unfortunately, so seriously all the time. It's just not correct. But thank you.
And I do want to let you know, I did talk to Mr. MacArthur myself, one-on-one, and just told him basically what I just told the board. And it's not that Recology is looking for the credit or the recognition. We're looking forward to the day that those kindergartens are in junior high school and those kindergartens jump into high school and trash is gone. It's just gone. And that's what we're here to do. And just wish it would go further than the school district. Any questions?
Authority members, we're in public comments, so I want to see if there's anybody else who has public comment. We can call you back up, Tommy, if there are any questions. Did your operations manager want to say anything other than hello, nice to meet you? Pleasure. Any other public comments on this issue? And I want to stay to the issue of what the action item will be, whether this authority directs staff to write a letter clarifying what the board does and they correct this mistakes. And in that motion, if we so agree to move that way, will be the bullet points of what will be in that letter. So that's what we're doing at this time. So I'll keep it open for any additional public comments. And you've been here, Tommy.
And I would suggest not to write a letter, let it go.
Okay.
And everyone, just my conversation with Mr. MacArthur, he had bad information, inaccurate information, not thorough information, and that's not necessarily his fault. That was her fault, okay.
Well, we're not looking to blame anybody. We just know. We only have one newspaper.
But, I think...
I appreciate what you're saying about the newspaper being accurate sometimes, and sometimes I scratch my head and I'm looking at what was that all about? But then it's our only newspaper and is our window to the community. So I thank you for your...
I would, at this time, if I were the board, I would make a suggestion to just let it go. Just let it go.
Okay.
And let's move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Sparrow.
And I hate to say this, I got to run.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tommy. Yes, come on up. This will be public comments. Still open?
Hi, Craig Strong, county resident. I'm actually just seconding Tommy's suggestion that letters to the editor are necessarily opinion pieces, and frequently the facts are actually opinions and different things. And it's obvious that Dawn had good intentions at heart, and I think the letter stands on its own despite any slight inaccuracies, and I would recommend that they just let it go. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, we will now see there are no other public comments. I'm looking around the room for anyone else who wishes to come up to the dais, identify themselves in public comments. I see none. I will close public comments. I will bring it back to the authority and get for comments and whether we want to move forward, or as some folks in the audience have suggested, let sleeping dogs lie, however you want to handle it.
I would like just to make a comment that at the high school, now that I'm teaching there, the kids are getting it, and they're actually asking me because we don't have a recycling program at the high school unless it's led by some of the teachers. And it'd be nice to have recycling bins in the halls because they come up to me and they have their stuff. It's sad, but they come up to me.
Okay, well, none of the cross is heard by the set, so you have to be at the microphone.
They're not in the halls, and they come to me, or they're not in the classrooms, and they say, hey, is there somewhere to recycle this? And it's like, well, no, I don't have any recycling in my classroom, so. But they are knowledgeable about the kids, so you have been impacting them. Good job.
Any other board comments?
I'm still inclined to say I'd like to have a letter correcting the facts out there. I do think, as Ms. Henry said, that it can be a positive letter in the success of the program, but where the line got crossed over is Don wrote this as a school board member. If he wrote it as an individual, then you could let Sleeping die, but he's representing the school district on this, and the facts are incorrect. So I do think as an authority board, we need to draft a letter and submit it, and highlighting the success of the recycling program and the fact you had a private company actually do it, not the authority board. We were indirectly involved, but directly it was Recology and the school district were the two primary functions.
Commissioner Sullivan, is that the form of a motion?
Yeah. I would
Okay,
give
now,
direction to that.
I see this motion, which I've not asked for a second yet, but essentially, I just want to clarify it. It's a motion to send a letter, albeit perhaps a positive criticism, but one that should include bullet points in it. Would I ask you to please correct that, so that we are
Yeah,
giving staff direction, if we choose to go that route, that it has directed bullet points so that our staff can
Sure.
articulately
Absolutely.
write a
I'll
letter?
amend it. I'll amend the motion to do that.
Very good. Do I hear a second for Commissioner Sullivan's motion at this
I'll
time?
second.
And we have a movement and a second. Okay. We have a motion and we have a second. Open back to the board. Commissioner Holly?
Thank you. I'm very much in favor of education and public outreach. I think responding to a singular letter will only create more letters that will be requiring our response. I wouldn't mind a comprehensive program where we identify issues for the public so that the clarity is there as far as what our role is. But I will probably be voting against this motion relative to the letter in response.
Any other board comments? All right, I'll ask for the vote at this time. Karen, if you would.
Second.
We have a second from
From
Mary Wilson, Commissioner Wilson. So we have a motion, which will have bullet points associated with that. And Commissioner, just to clarify this, Commissioner Sullivan, would you identify those bullet points of what this letter should include, so we have it as part of the motion at this time?
Well, I think the figures need to be corrected, and I also think that the actual process that took place and the importance of Recology's involvement in doing this, but the fact it was a private company that did this, that had the savings in combination with the school district's programs for recycling. I mean, that should be a positive spin going forward as Tommy mentioned, every entity should be taking a look at the behavior, and that's really what we're talking about, but he didn't make that point in the letter.
I understand that. Now, Commissioner Wilson, are you all right to keep your second with that? Okay, we'll call the vote.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
No.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
And Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. All right, so the letter will go out. It will be a positive letter, one reflective of this board's intention with those bullet points that you have there. Ted, you have those bullet points from Mr. Sullivan?
The bullet that I am concerned about is the diving into correcting the figures, the dollar figures. That would take a bit of research, and he gave a 3-year average. I assume that the board wants me to do that research.
I'm going to say the timeliness of this letter is not to be something that can be delayed, because we are in a period right now, quite frankly, we're in an election cycle. So every day that we don't do something and it's going to cause you additional work to do this, I'd like a simple letter, one in which respectfully, according to what I heard Commissioner Sullivan say, corrects the letter writer as to not exact figures, but the information is essentially not correct and is presented by a private entity. So I think you heard those bullet points. Now, clarify this if you would, Commissioner Sullivan. Are you adamant on this, having these exact records need to be researched, or is this something you're happy you can live with some estimates?
Just as long as the figure's correct, I'm fine with that. I'm just tired of seeing things get repainted in the paper, and unless, especially as an elected official, unless somebody refutes it, then it's taken as the gospel, and that's not what happened. So having the authority board correct the actual what happened in the story, I think would be the point of the story. Because at this point,
yes.
The school district's not paying for recycling at all. There's your big savings.
Ted, are you understanding that?
I will certainly do my best to try.
Okay, can you run the letter by me if we can get this thing in a timely way? Today is Tuesday. I'd like to see this letter go out and forthwith. Remember, triplicate is not waiting for us. Letters come up and they they get accumulated, and you may see this 2 weeks from now, who knows?
Okay.
But I think it is exigent, and I'd like to see this letter go out just as per the board has voted on a 4-to-1 basis. Okay. Let us move on, please. And we are at, moving back to issue number 2, item number 2, Del Norte Solid Waste Task Force, discussion regarding meeting October 13th, 2014. Do we have someone here from the task force?
Wes Nunn is here from the task force, but Chair Miles was not able to make it. He did ask me to convey 2 things, and there's...
Yeah, actually, Ted will...
Okay.
Well, come up on here, Wes, so you'll be at the dais, and why don't you identify yourself first?
Wesley Nunn, I'm not the chair, but
Okay.
Richard Miles is not here.
Okay. All right, you're on the task force.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Ted.
So essentially, at the September 8th meeting, the task force voted that they suggest that there be 9 members on the task force because the actual number of members on the task force isn't entirely clear. So they suggest that there be 9. There are currently 8. At the request of the chair of the task force and other communications, the Board of Supervisors did notice that there were vacancies and solicited applications. 2 applications have been received, and at the last night's meeting, the task force voted to ask that the Board of Supervisors extend the application deadline through the 19th of December. Based on the applications received, they thought it would be good to receive more, and I can work with the Board of Supervisors administrative staff in terms of who runs that ad and when it runs.
Great, Ted, thank you. Wes, anything additional?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Board members? Okay. No action here for this one?
So long as the board has no objection to that course of action, then
Commissioners?
fine.
Any objection?
No, I think they brought it up.
Okay.
The only reason was because you guys were having a hard time meeting quorum, wasn't it, for just doing business?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, no action is necessary. We'll move on to consent agenda. Item number 3, approve minutes, regular session. Move on to 3.2, receive and file actuarial report from Bickmore. And number 3.3, approve employer contribution by check under
Move to approve
agreement.
consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Board comments?
I just have one on item number 3.2. Again, brought it up last year as far as the amount of money that's put in towards the retirement. It's just a partial payment. Again, it's $11,125 is going in towards last year. There was an amount that was due, which was $55,000.
Commissioner Wilson, that's 3.3. You said 3.2? Did I miss?
3.2.
Okay, 3.3 is 11,125.
3.2.
Okay.
3.2 is
3.2, I'm
3.3
looking
is
at,
what
I'm
it
just
is.
letting the public know what's
Okay.
going on with the unfunded liabilities. And so basically, this year, the same amount is going in, the $11,000, and what the report states is there is a, the should be a $95,000 amount is required for contributions this year. So basically, they're putting in that there'll be a 3% inflation rate, and they are assuming that there'll be a return on investment of 7.5%, which is, I feel, kind of high. So I don't know. I'm not familiar with government doing this before. All I can see is that we're not completely funding the amount of money that we owe. So that concerns me. I guess the other government does it, but I know people are depending upon this for retirement, and so we're only putting in $11,125. So everybody, so that's what this report says, is that it should, we calculate the annual required contribution to be $95,903. We anticipate that the authority will contribute $11,125 of the $95,000. So basically, it states in here that, of course, our unfunded liabilities are going up approximately, shoot, now I have to try and put, well, they're going up a lot. I think it was $200,000 total. So that's public information. That's what's in this report.
You know,
It's a bit concerning for me.
Go ahead.
I read the report, and it's a complex report. You really have to know numbers to get through this, and maybe I don't know them as well as I should. But on Table 3, under benefits provided, it says the authority permits eligible retirees to continue their medical and/or dental coverage through the authority for their lifetime. The authority then charges the retiree for coverage based upon age, years of authority service, and coverage level, i.e. single, two-party, or family coverage. I guess my question is, when I look at this report and it says we have $1.3 million in liability, if the employee is paying for their retirement benefits, why is there any liability? I just don't, I'm not grasping it, and I was hoping somebody from Bickmore would be here, because I don't get it. They're paying, I think the city allows long-term employees to, they throw like $75 a month at their retiree medical benefits, which is a nice help, but it sure doesn't add up to anything like we're dealing with here. So
But I believe
I must be
yeah.
missing something.
Well, I think we mirror the county on it, and the county 100% funds retirement PERS. The employee doesn't contribute, except for the PERS reform that's going forward. And Sherrick, you might add to that, because this is all of us. I mean, and I think the county, it's not under city policy, it's under county policy. So county policy, when an employee, there's a shared up for 5 years. After 5 years, the county contributes 100% of PERS contribution, no employee contribution. And that's changing over the next 4 years because of PERS reform. But I don't, Sherrick, you want to come up?
Sherrick Cron, Assistant Auditor Controller. The solid waste plan does mirror the county's plan.
Okay.
It is based on that.
So anybody working more than 5 years, the solid waste is contributing all of their retirement benefits.
Correct, except for what's going on with the Pension Reform Act.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's a shared cost after the next 4, is it 4 years?
Yes.
Yeah, after 4 years, then there is a shared cost going above a certain level, but,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. As I read this, I thought we were only talking about benefits. We're actually talking about retirement pensions?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that easily gets it up there. I thought, I kept reading the headings, and it kept referring to medical and dental and those kinds of things, and I'm thinking there's no way that could add up to that.
What
we're
they didn't
talking
talk
the
about is
actual-
PERS poor performance, which is amazing that they're still coming back and asking for more contributions. And, you know, the last 3 years, the market's been incredible, but PERS has been miserable. So, anyway.
Yeah, well, I hope they do well. So anyway, I guess that's enough to know that this is a pension liability and not just benefits. I somehow didn't see that in this information. Okay.
All right, any other board comments? I'll open up to public at this time to come up and address consent agenda items only, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. I see none, so we'll bring it back to the board for action. And we have a motion, and we have a second, if I'm not mistaken. So let's call the vote.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, that consent agenda is done, and we'll move on. There's nothing in landfill closure. Collections franchise, 5.1, discussion, possible action regarding status and allocation of authority-directed bin pools for 2014. And I just want to share some kind of exigent information. I just heard back from the city just at this moment. I asked about the clarification. They will need one, and it will be, and I clarified that it is for calendar year 2014. And we are in essentially November, so that would be new information if you want to do the arithmetic on this, Ted, when you make your report, that the city has requested one that's a Safeway, behind the Safeway cleanup, and they are anticipating doing this work during the calendar year 2014. So go ahead, Ted.
If the board approves that, the use of that dumpster for that purpose, then there would remain 3 dumpsters to be allocated. The other, in an email from the city manager, he also mentioned the board may wish to discuss the ultimate cleanup of 400 Front Street, which is the fresh seafood market, the former Jefferson State Brewery, as another potential project. I did send out an email to Jay and Heidi and Dave Mason, and I did not receive word back from them about their priorities in terms of cleanup. So the bottom line is there are 4 remaining dumpsters for allocation. City has requested one for a cleanup behind Safeway on the public property there, and the others are at the board's discretion. Also, if the board does not specifically direct the use of these bins for community cleanups, we could potentially use them to defray some of the hauling costs for the transfer stations in Gasky or Klamath during the month of December.
Okay. Authority board members, comments? Seeing no comments, and I would like to make this comment. I've said this before, I'm kind of almost to the point where like I harangue on it. I don't want to squander any dumpsters. 3 is a good number. Last year we were faced with maybe with 1. So with the idea that the city will need 1 at our next meeting, I'd like to agendize the possibility of deploying those 3 dumpsters, or a combination of 1 or 2, just as you suggested, that way, or into another needy project. And I say this because there are plenty of needy projects around, and I'd like to see that on the agenda for deployment during the month of December. So we have a November meeting, and during the month of December, these dumpsters could be working for us, so we've fully maximized the 20 that are allocated to us during the calendar year, and that would be something that, again, either we use it or we lose it. So having that been said, it is an action item, so I will come to the audience now in public comments and to see if they have any suggestions, perhaps use of these remaining 3 dumpsters out in the community. Does anybody from the public wish to address at this time? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. So the action item is, Mr. Ward, is what? Is to accept the city's request to have 1 additional dumpster deployed behind Safeway for calendar year 2014. And the action will be to thoroughly vet the possibility of using the remaining dumpsters during the month of December at our November agenda meeting. Is that, would be the action item?
That would be fine. You can do that by consensus.
All right. And do we have a consensus on that since we have 3 left? Is there anybody who objects to that?
Point of clarification.
Yes.
Because I'm reading on the agenda, but I'm looking for the backup paperwork. It says what we're actually allocating.
In other words, well, there are, from what I'm hearing, and Ted, correct me if I'm wrong, there were 4 of them.
Yes.
Four. We've used 16. There's 4 left.
That's correct.
Now with the city,
these are
saying there'll be 1 more. Now we have 3.
Mr. Sullivan's education and those people who are watching at home.
Okay.
Sorry, you got it?
Okay. Do we have a consensus? Okay. I've seen no objections to that. Ted, what I would like to do, and have all the board authority members look at the possibilities of deploying up to 3 dumpsters during the month of December, unless something comes up in the November meeting, but this would be put on our November agenda. And the first Wednesday in the first Wednesday in November would be when we'll decide if we're going to use those remaining 3 dumpsters in the community.
Yes. And the board should be aware that one of the critical issues on arranging such cleanups are, first, if it's on public property, that makes it a lot easier. And then the other thing is getting a crew to actually do the cleanup work is a very important thing. And if there's any equipment necessary, then that also needs to be gathered together.
Volunteerism does not seem to be the problem. Speaking from personal experience, we have no shortage of volunteers, whether it's Lions Club, where I'm going to after this meeting today. They've asked me to specifically say, where can we help? Our Daily Bread Ministries. I don't think we'll have a problem getting volunteers. I think we might have a problem with the dumpster, but apparently, as I see the arithmetic is laying out, there are going to be 3. There's going to be 3 remaining. And that's something that we'd like to utilize during the month of December. And again, who knows what the weather will be like. That's very iffy weather. So I think we'll move forward. We have a consensus on that in 5.1, and we will move on to transfer station issues at this point. 6.1, discussion possible action regarding hazardous waste collection event, October 3rd and 4th at the transfer station. Ted?
I'll be really brief about this. Bottom line is we had 226 vehicles compared to 209 vehicles the year prior. It was a successful event. This is the only time during the year that we can take pesticides, herbicides, poisons, solvents things like that we don't take every day. But one of the things that most people involved in the event have noticed is there's much less waiting. There is not the lines that we've experienced in the past. We seem to have a relatively few but fairly consistent number of vehicles, and the vehicles that come in tend to bring quite a large number of materials, and so we're glad to provide them service. It seems that the bill for this year we would anticipate to be somewhat similar, perhaps just a little bit more than the bill last year, and those costs have been reduced in part because of the paint care program that we're participating in, as paint care is not only handling the paint that we receive every day at the transfer station, but they're also partnered with Clean Harbors, who is our contractor for the hazardous waste collection event, and so they process all of the paint received through either every day or at that event. So the staff recommendation is that the board direct staff to negotiate an extension of 3 years with Clean Harbors to continue to provide the services associated with Del Norte's annual hazardous waste collection events through August 12th, 2017. So that's the maximum amount that we can extend this agreement. It is at the board's discretion that we do so. If the board does not take action within the next few months to extend this agreement, it will expire, and we need to go through a procurement process to select another hazardous waste collection event contractor.
I'll make a motion for that.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and we have a second. I do have a question with regard to, you've got a far out date, November 2017, which is essentially 3 years from now.
That's correct.
Is this not something we can do on a yearly basis?
You can do it on a yearly basis, but then we would have to do it every year.
Well, I'm trying to think, and again, my mind is...
Wait, let me see if I have that correct. We can't do it yearly, but then we'd have to do it every year?
Yep.
Okay.
Glad you got that.
Late in the afternoon. Here's my issue with this, and maybe it's just me thinking it's the end of the day, and we had a lot of meetings earlier today, is why aren't we just doing this every year rather than going 3 years out? Is there an advantage? Is there a cost savings? Is there some reason that we're going 3 years out? And please, I'm open to the suggestions.
So what happens is that we try to control our expenses as best we can on these hazardous waste events, which is somewhat challenging because you don't know necessarily what you're going to receive. And so in our competition, in our competitive proposal process that we had before, we had a very detailed cost breakdown in terms of what we could be charged for when. Because our experience prior to that was that if there wasn't something that was on the agreed document, then they could charge whatever we were willing to pay. But they had already taken the material, and so we were rather at their mercy. So this is one of our more detailed contracts, and it does take a while to develop that request for proposals. And I would recommend that if we do so, that be over an extended period of time. The downside of only doing a year-by-year extension is that that does open the opportunity for them to change the prices in that negotiation. So by doing a multi-year extension, it sort of locks in and settles those prices.
So there is a cost savings by going 3 years out?
Potentially there is, yes.
We have a motion. We have a second. I'll open it up to the public for input. Public comments at this time? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. I'm still not convinced that we shouldn't do this annually, but I'm going to leave it up. This is our board decision, so let's call the vote.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Wisdom prevails, yes. Okay, always go where I see the action is a certain way, and I appreciate that. And hopefully we will realize some savings. That's always good news to do that. Okay, we'll move on to 6.2, discussion possible action regarding management of expired marine flares in Del Norte County, 6.2.
Again, this will be fairly brief. I was asked to continue this on the agenda, but the only action that's happened is I've left some messages, and I did ask that the California Product Stewardship Council consider making marine flares as one of their priority target products. But in all honesty, I would be surprised if they did so, because there's relatively few counties in the state that have marine flares that are a problem for them. And so I just anticipate they'll have other members who are advocating other priority products. That said, the problems with marine flares do continue, and I do think it's advisable that we try to convene multi-agency meetings to figure out what our capacities and our constraints are, to try to figure out a program that will work. But I don't have anything further to report at this time.
Authority members? Well, I guess I'm the one who's asking these questions. We should be meeting with the sheriff to find out how to transfer this ordinance. And I say the word ordinance, not ordinance, but ordinance. It's another way of saying these are flammable. These are objects that you need a special permit to use. I'm challenged by the fact that we have Coast Guard direction that these have to be expired in 36 months, and they're expired, and then where they end up, no one knows. I can only conjecture that it's going to end up somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. Because, you know, probably, I don't know if I'm right or wrong on that. That's my sense on this thing. I'm of the opinion that we should look to vet this thing a little stronger and bring in the sheriff's department to see how we can transfer this down. I'd like to know what Mendocino County does. There's a port in Fort Bragg, a very active port. Maybe we should be talking to their harbor down there. Mr. Helms, I see you're in the audience. Maybe you can help us a little bit and see if we can at this next, because I want to keep this as an active agenda item, to see what small areas are doing. We're not Los Angeles County. We don't have the wherewithal or the resources to move these marine flares, but certainly there are smaller harbors, perhaps even in Oregon, Brookings, where they have similar problems. This is Coast Guard, this is federal, so Brookings also has an issue. What do they do with their expired flares? Brookings Harbor. So I would ask that this be fully vetted. And again, Mr. Helms, thank you for your input on this. If you can get back to us or through Ted, we'd be greatly appreciative. I'm just of the opinion there's got to be a solution here rather than $25 a flare to dispose of it in Louisiana. I think that's the number you gave me. That, to me, is insane. It makes no sense to me. So that having been said, let's keep it on the agenda for next November, where hopefully we'll have some...
I'd just be curious when you're doing your research, Ted, if we really know what the hazard is that's presented by marine flares. I mean, common sense tells you they're dangerous to wildlife and fish and people, but I don't know that. I don't know if they degrade in a particular way that wouldn't be dangerous.
Well, they're explosive, and over time, explosive materials tend to become more volatile and of a greater concern, so there's greater transport restrictions.
Right.
As Brian McNally of the Health Department mentioned last meeting, perchlorate is certainly one of the primary concerns associated with the marine flares. Beyond that, we've got more research to do.
I just didn't know if it goes over the edge, what kind of hazard is presented. I think that's what we need to make our case, and I don't know.
Generally, going over the edge is bad for the fish, and for fishermen and people who are interested in selling fish,
I would think
there's a connection.
All right, so we'll hear back from you next month on that, Ted. Thank you. 7.1, General Solid Waste Authority matters. Discussion, possible action regarding Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority work plan for the year 14-15.
Based on the input at the last meeting, I reformatted the work priorities list and did my best to meet board direction. I'd be happy to discuss.
Can we take some time and take a look at this next time? I just received this at the meeting. I did pull all the 3-year previous work plan, and it would take some time. I tried to, I didn't not receive an attachment when you sent out that email. So can we table this till next time? Is that okay with everybody?
Actually,
I have no problem.
Yeah.
You can make a motion to table it, and we can bring it back.
I thought it's a lot cleaner now. I think it makes more sense, but I would agree with Mary. I'd like to spend a little bit of time to read it before the next meeting.
Okay, so a motion and a second to table this matter until the November meeting. Let's call this is an action item, so I'll refer it to the public. Any public input on this?
Not if we're going to table it.
No, now we're going to table. Okay, correction. So let's take a vote to table. Karen?
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Hawley?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, 7.2, discussion possible action regarding the content of the final R3 report, including but not limited to developing elements of a strategic plan such as short, medium, and long-term goals and possible setting of future meeting dates for such planning. Let me say this about 7.2. I'm going to keep this on the agenda for each meeting as long as I'm chair, because there's input that changes all the time, and I want to let this board discuss this so it's properly agendized. And I will ask, Ted, you've already explained it, so we pretty much know what this is all about. Do any authority members have any comments they wish to make about the R3 report, what we're going to do, and how we're going to do it?
Well, it always bears repeating. Basically, the R3 report, again, in their executive summary, it states that there is significant opportunity and potential to restructure how the authority functions, to provide more efficient and cost-effective use of staff and other resources. And for the public that's watching on TV, this is a report that was commissioned by this body to look into their professionals in the solid waste field, and they put together this report that I'm reading right now. And basically, again in here, they felt that any restructuring of the authority should focus on streamlining and improving management and administrative functions, including financial management policies and procedures, and reducing management and administrative staffing levels to bring them more in line with that required to be effectively administer the current responsibilities of authority. So was their bottom line, or one of their bottom lines in this first paragraph. Based on our review, it is clear it is not necessary to staff both the executive director and program manager positions to effectively administer the current responsibilities of the authority. So again, that's something that we continue to look at in review, the R3 report. And so I think that might, I just wanted to read that out loud before we proceed a little bit further into the agenda, which talks about the interim director, just for review, because I know once we often will read a report, it's put in the drawer, and I just wanted to bring it out again, how clear they were in regards to the current duties that this body is completing, that it was their assessment that we were, again, administratively top-heavy. So I just wanted to read that during this session, and I didn't really have an action item to call.
Okay, I'm hearing that also, that this is informational only. Any other authority members wish to weigh in on 7.2? We're going to move on to 7.3 afterward. But
I just feel like I need to state that I remember that verbiage. I didn't bring the R3 report with me, so I don't know it completely, but I do know that there was some caveats, and that was that certain duties be taken over to the county, like the landfill management and those kinds of things, to leave enough time for the reduction to one position. And so I think we need to consider that as well. A couple things. One, I appreciate and acknowledge that we actually did a mission statement at the last meeting. It felt good as I was reading through the minutes. And so that's a good start, and I would suggest that maybe on our letterhead or our agendas, we can print that mission statement on the top to remind us all what we're doing and why we're here. That would be nice. I do think, too, that this particular item is tied into 7.3 possibly, and that we should talk further at that time.
well, as I said before, this is a very evolving issue, and more information comes up, it reflects that. So at this point, unless there's any action to be taken on 7.3, I'm going to move on.
Well, I do think on the next one,
Unless there is, then I'll bring it to the public if there is an action to be taken on this. So Commissioner Sullivan,
I thought I had requested, but what I'd like to have on our next agenda is an explanation for the education of the public and members of the board is what is just the breakdown of this is what Recology does, this is what Hambros does, this is what the authority does. Because I think there's a lot of confusion sometime as to who does what in this. Several times we had people in the last couple of years saying, don't take my service away. Well, the service is basically set on a contract, so it's in place and it's done by Recology and Hambros.
all right, so Ted, can I ask you please on the next, for November, to have a delineation of responsibilities for the authority, for Hambro, and I see Mr. White is here with some input, exactly what clear understanding is from Recology. Those are the three partners, the three parts of this process. So by the November meeting, we'll have a clear delineation of areas of responsibility, and this is for public edification. I think we all as board members know what each does, but the public may not, so maybe they need to be reminded. And so if we can do that in November. So having said that, I'm going to move on to the next item, which is 7.3, and this is discussion and possible action regarding the drafting and release of a request for proposals for the position of interim director for the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority. So Ted, if you'd read the narrative, thank you.
Regarding this item of issuing a request for proposals, a request for proposals is used as a competitive way to select the best services available, not necessarily at the best price, but the best combination of services and performance for the best price, so the best value. Generally, I need further direction before we can even draft a request for proposals, because there's lots of things that I'm not clear on, and I need the board to clarify. What is the process, whether there's a committee working with the county personnel department, whether this is a regular agenda item for authority meetings, but what is the process by which a request for proposals is to be drafted, reviewed, and approved? Is that entirely my responsibility, or are you shifting it to legal counsel? That's the question. What job description is to be used? Each of the job descriptions that we have issues. The one that the former director was working under is Solid Waste Management Authority Manager, and it's honestly a very old job description and hasn't been updated in some time. The job description from R3 can't really be used as it's presented, because that job description combined many of the activities of the director and program manager positions, and formally shifted responsibilities such as education and public outreach, stormwater monitoring and landfill maintenance, and reallocated some of the daily cash accounting responsibilities. So the job description as it stands from R3 isn't really useful, and the job description for the solid waste management manager isn't exactly ready to go. So I would need some description as to how those would be revised. What are the minimum qualifications or experience for the applicants? What would be the term of the interim director position, and what would be expected to be achieved during that term? Could the term be shortened or extended, and if so, under what circumstances? We just talked about extending the agreement with the household hazardous waste collection contractor. Similarly, if you were to extend the agreement with the interim director, under what framework would that extension occur? Is the interim director position to be an independent contractor? This is an area of personnel that I would need additional advice, either from legal counsel or the personnel department. But if so, would that result in limitations on the authority setting the workplace and working hours of this position, and what insurance coverage and requirements would be associated with that contractor position? And if this is not to be an independent contractor position, are there any restrictions on soliciting requests for proposals to provide services as an authority employee? And how should the authority's benefits package be most accurately described?
There are a lot of issues, and honestly, I believe that, not to interrupt here, but Mr. Ward is laying it all out very clearly, and it's something that this body needs to direct. What type of interim director are we looking for, and what is the scope of their work? Kind of in bullet. And so I think that would definitely be something that, if not, one or two people on this board could get together and take a look and fill in those blanks, and to kind of suggest, what we're looking for, because it bears looking at in detail, and it's been pretty obvious that it's very difficult to do that, and on this at this level, I would suggest that maybe a couple board members could take a look at that. I don't know. Mr. Hawley is always so good at this, and
well, thank you.
Maybe
it sounds like you're volunteering him.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Mr. Hawley, Commissioner Hawley, would you like to check in on this? I do have some comments to make with regard to the parameters under which Mr. Ward is referring, but go ahead. I'll defer to you.
I do think we need some kind of a draft that gives the thoughts of at least one or two of us as to the scope of work. And it's only from that draft, once we define the scope, that we'll be able to come up with how much time is going to be needed. As a body, though, we're going to have to decide issues like, is the person going to be an employee or going to be a contractor? Those are major issues. But the scope will also define a lot of other things. So I think that's what we need to do, is define the scope of work, much like we define the scope of work for R3. So, I mean, regardless of whether you agree with their findings, it was beneficial to have that evaluation, and I think the scope made it easier for them to follow what we needed. And I think that's kind of what we're looking for now, although we don't expect an evaluation in the end. But I've said this before, I think it would be good to have an interim director that had the ability to, again, shepherd us through the rest of the strategic planning process. An interim director that will initiate and provide us with new job descriptions once he or she is in the position, so that we can determine how we're going to proceed with recruiting a permanent executive director. There's some major issues, and so we need to, honestly, I think the committee, if it's me or it's someone else, needs to get together with Mr. Ward. I'd like to find out what Mr. Ward, I'd like his input on what he does on a daily basis, so we can figure out how best to manage the organization while we go through this interim period.
Yeah, and if it's temporary, again, so for the board to put.
Yeah, I would, I'm going to just chime in after what you said, and I do think the interim director's got to be an independent contractor. I don't think, my belief is we should have an independent contractor all the way across the board, even when we do have the permanent director, just because getting into the benefits skews everything. I just think it's cleaner that way.
I have a question with regard to this and to this role. Should this be a part-time position, 20 hours, rather than 40-hour week? You all see this as a possibility of having a part-time director, someone there who's there to do specific functions? And I say this because
I would look to evaluate month by month, I think. I think for the first month, I think you're looking at a full month, I think, just to get up.
So this is a short-term employee?
Yes, and again, when I say short-term, I'm looking at because we have to vet the R3 report and make decisions accordingly. I see this as basically up to 180 days. Now, Ted has been in this position doing basically 2 jobs, a program director and an acting director, and I'm recognizing that it's taxing. Now, having said that, that's why I said let's see if we can get to a part-time interim director who are as administrative, as financially capable, someone who knows how to put together the necessary parts of it. I'm not saying someone needs to be expert in matters of solid waste even. I think we need an administrator who is able to do that on a part-time basis and put our meetings together. And then while we're looking for the permanent director, as you said, Commissioner Hawley, shepherds us through this period where we are looking for a permanent director rather than someone who is an interim director who is going to perform more than a custodial job. Again, a basic function which will free Ted up to do his job as program director. So that's how I envision this. I'm all on board certainly with appointing members of this governance right here to sit down and work with Ted in helping draft this position. If Commissioner Wilson, would you be willing to be one of the 2 members, and Commissioner?
Not at this time. I would like to suggest Commissioner Sullivan.
Okay, well,
we're
all volunteering each other.
And I'd be fine with doing that. I think it's been done partially, because we did initially, after the previous director was let go on that, we actually talked to a couple different people and had some type of preliminary job description down for it. So I think there may be a starting point. So we can do the other stuff you're talking about and get that input.
Okay, so Commissioner Sullivan, you'd be willing to be one of those 2? And I'm using only from the standpoint of we have a county representative, and I'm fully aware of Mr. Gastineau's extremely difficult schedule at school. Okay, the gestures come through flying colors. Yeah. So, Commissioner Hawley?
I'd be honored.
Okay, so will you 2 please get together and cogitate this? And taking the input of this board with you, that we have a vision of what an interim director is supposed to be. I happen to think a part-time position is one that might serve the needs during this 180-day period. And if you come up with parameters where there's some flexibility there, then that will be perhaps a little easier for this board to understand as we move into the November meeting.
I think the scope of work will define.
Right. I think that, somebody with fresh eyes to evaluate the whole organization and see how they can direct it with what type of staffing that they need as to go on would be a great thing, too.
And with a very strong financial background. Again, I did not bring this up under the R3, and I spent a bit of time putting it together, but basically, again, I went back through the Smith and Newell reports, which show in 2011 there was a $423,000 loss in operating income. 2012, there was $127,000 to the positive, but again, in 2013, it shows this operating loss, so that would mean that the expenditures were more than the revenues, and according to Smith and Newell, it shows a negative $62,000 loss. So, and prior to that, I did pull out again Neil Lopez's ad hoc report, and he's was the assistant auditor at the time, and during the past 3 fiscal years, he's quoted that 2008, 9, and 10, the authority's expenditures exceeded their revenue. Jay Serena also stated in May of 11 that the budgets are not completely accurate, including overestimating revenue and underestimating expenditures, and that again, so there's been a pattern, and we did have one positive year there, but if you really take a look at the operating income on the Smith and Newell reports, or someone does, that we need to again plan for the future and monitor our expenses. And so I just want to make sure that there's someone that looks at that has a real good handle on the financial.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Wilson. Anything having to do with money, I'm always going to ask for input from the auditor's office. So Sherrick, if you would please communicate my wishes to Clint that I would like his input. I think once we get there, in terms of formulating the position of a new interim director for a short-term period, and I'm using 180 days as an example. It may be a little less, it might be a little more, but I think if we did that, and I'm hearing very much a consensus that a financial background is key. So
I think we're going to be using Joey Young too from the county. So
okay.
Just on the personal. So
all right. So that was
too.
fun. We're looking for assistance. So in coalescing this issue. So this is an action item. So I will open it up to the public. Anybody from the public who wishes to address item number 7.3, discussion action regarding the drafting and release of a request for proposals for the position of interim director for the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority. And I see Mr. Lonsdale is coming forward. And council, will I need this in the form of a motion, or will this be a consensus action? So it's basically not a motion, it's a consensus. Go ahead, Mr. Lonsdale.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Bill Lonsdale again. Once again, I apologize, I'm confused. What is it that we're trying to do here? Are we looking for somebody to manage a transition, or are we looking for somebody to be in charge for a period of time? There's a big difference in how you would describe the responsibilities in whether it's a job announcement or a request for proposals. A request for proposals suggests to me that you're looking for a contractor. I don't know. I don't envy Commissioner Holly and Commissioner Sullivan, but we're trying to weave their way through a lot of different ideas that have been surfaced by the board in this meeting. It comes down to basic lines of authority. Who, under this scheme, is going to be in charge? Because somebody has to be in charge. Right now, Mr. Ward is in charge. But if Mr. Ward is going to continue to do all the things that have just been validated in the work plan, and this other fellow or lady is going to parachute in a couple of times a week or whatever part-time amounts to, what's the job? And then what is that person going to work against? We finally have a mission statement, but as the R3 report pointed out, that realignments and that sort of thing shouldn't be undertaken until the board sets out goals, objectives, against which those changes can be measured. So, you know, if you're going to hire somebody right now, what are you hiring that person for? If it is to try to implement goals that haven't been specified, a mission statement that has no backup in terms of specifics, who are you going to get? What's the person going to do? I must confess I'm confused, and so I do not envy you two gentlemen at all. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lonsdale. We are going through this in a manner which is expressing due diligence as best we can. So your questions are very relevant. Anybody else in the public wish to address? Okay.
Elizabeth Henry, county resident. I'm very confused about the whole interim thing because I'm trying to visualize this person coming. What happens to Mr. Ward? What's his position? And, you know, to me, you're putting off and putting off and putting off biting the bullet. You need another person in this agency and pursue that person, make a, you know, define a job description and go after that. This is going to be another delay of how many months, and meanwhile Mr. Ward continues trying to keep his head above water. I don't understand what's keeping you from facing the, you know, the reality that you need someone else. Now who, as Mr. Lonsdale, I think he used a good word, who's going to parachute in and save the day? You need somebody that knows what's going on in this in the county, the city. They're going to have background, whether financial is fine, but you're also going to have to be able to deal with the other issues. So how someone gets up to speed and all that, I truly don't understand. And again, you know, I envy you your job. I'm not sure it's possible. And I would rather see you work on something permanent. The public doesn't understand. I'm trying to represent that. We don't understand what this whole interim thing means. So, you know, you need to be clearer in communicating that. It's a big mystery to most of us.
Any additional public comments at this time? Seeing not, we'll close public comments. I'll bring it back to the board, and I just want to address Mr. Lonsdale and Ms. Henry. Clearly, Mr. Ward is doing and wearing lots of hats, and it's taking its toll. I can sympathize with him that he's having to do many jobs. This board is not ready to seek out a permanent director until it vets all of the options. And the options are 3 of them. And until I get clarification, a 4th option is one that council has told us is not an option. So we're looking at 3 options from the R3 report or hybrid versions. It just cannot be moved quickly. I would like to sit here and tell you that, but Mr. Ward's been doing 2 jobs for a year and a half, 18 months. So we're looking to get him some assistance so he can do his program director's job. That's the whole purpose of what we're doing here, and we're trying to do this in a timely manner. So I hope that clarifies some of the questions you have as to what the intentions are of this board. Is we want to get people back into the functions while we vet the R3 report. And that has been more than complicated, unfortunately. It's not something you can just willy-nilly go through. So that having said that, I ask and indulge your patience as this board gets through the...
Mr. Chair, I do have a question. This has happened a couple times over the last year, but the audience, and in particular certain audience members, have asked us to get an interim director. That's what we're in the process of doing. So I guess I'm confused. My confusion is you asked us to do something, we're doing it. So the same thing with a consultant. You asked us to get a consultant, we got a consultant. But you're not happy with the results from the consultant's report. So I guess that's my confusion on my part, because we're actually responding to what the audience is saying. So, no, we're not going to do a dialogue. I'll be glad to talk to you about other, but...
You've had, okay, hold on. Commissioner Sullivan, hold on. Ms. Henry, let me be very clear on this. We will not have banter. We will not go back and forth this way. I understand. You had your moment. That's how the meetings work. You had your 3 minutes to explain your point of view. We will not have banter back and forth. Now, Ms. Henry, I'm just going to ask you very quickly. Okay, you're not on the record now.
Take it out.
Now, Commissioner Sullivan has responded to your 3 minutes on the board, and that was your opportunity to opine on this. We'll not have this conversation as me as the chairman. So that having been said, Commissioner Sullivan, you've made your point very clear. We're trying to, and I think I've underscored that, we are doing our level best to speak to the issue of what this community wants. Now, I'll ask other authority members, if they wish to opine on this and check in and respond to Ms. Henry and Mr. Lonsdale's comments, feel free at this time. Mr. Gastineau, Commissioner Gastineau, yes or no? Commissioner Wilson, Commissioner Hawley, yes? Anything else you'd like to add to clarify the points that brought out by both Mr. Lonsdale and Ms. Henry?
No.
Okay.
I think we need to move forward and figure out how we're going to address this issue.
And we are. And we are moving forward. So we have a committee of Commissioner Sullivan and Commissioners Hawley. You'll meet together and you'll coalesce this interim position. Whether you think it's a draft, and you come back with a full at the November meeting, whether it's a full-time position or a part-time position, let us then do it from that point, and we'll move from there. So there will be no, I guess the action is by consensus. Are we agreeing that this is the committee that will meet with Mr. Ward to discuss this? And do I have a consensus on that? Yes. Okay. So then we can move on. Now I know people are getting ready to leave and move, and I want to be considerate of everybody's time here. So we'll move right into the Director and Treasurer's report, which is 8.1. And Mr. Ward, your 8.1, you can keep going right through to 8.5.
I will do this as time efficiently as possible. Regarding authority work plans and activities, we have purchased a new trash pump to do the remaining samples that are necessary at the landfill. That was to be completed in August. It is not yet completed because of the equipment issues. Let's see. Assembly Bill 270, a ban on plastic grocery bags, has passed both the Senate and the Assembly and been signed into law. There's text of that law that's attached to the report. Next month, we will be doing inspection and sampling of stormwater and surface water at both the landfill and county transfer station. We're working with Smith & Newell to complete the external audit. We will be coordinating meetings regarding expired marine flares, as well as the drafting of the RFP for the interim director position. An issue has come up that I'm dealing with regarding Creative Information Systems, the software company that authors our scale management software. At this point in time, we have an issue regarding partial payments and credit cards. I trust we'll get to a resolution, but I'm working on it. And then we're doing outreach to Sutter Coast Hospital, as we have encountered a number of reports of, how should I put it, information that is not consistent with the information we have regarding the proper way to manage home-generated sharps and medicines. So we want to make sure that we're all providing the same level of advice. Regarding the financial reports, our treasurer is here. Bottom line is that we have $648,620 in our cash account, plus $198,177 is prepayment for the last payment at the transfer station. We're working on our, let's see, you've got the budget reports, the claims approved director. Once again, the largest claim is the regular payment to Hambro for their August monthly activities. And in terms of our financial projections, we are a little bit behind in where we expected to be in terms of our franchise fee revenues, but we're quite a bit ahead of our financial projections on the authority service fees. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Authority members? No questions? Okay, we'll then move on, and that's it. So we'll adjourn at this time to the next meeting of the Del Norte Solid Waste Authority, which will be scheduled for 3:30 in this building, November the 12th, 2014. I just want to make sure that is not the holiday, correct? That is the Wednesday, yes, okay. This is our regular time, normal time. This was a different date in this building and Flynn Center. So having said that, we will adjourn. Thank you.